For those who don't know, Sergio Leone is a director who revolutionized the Western genre with his Dollars Trilogy. This trilogy featured Clint Eastwood as a nameless drifter who arrives in a town and settles a conflict before leaving again just as mysteriously as he arrived. These films were inspired by the samurai films of Akira Kurosawa, and these films were different from the typical John Wayne heroic Americana westerns that came before it. Although the Dollars Trilogy pays homage to the genre's foundations, it presents a grittier, morally gray view of the West that opposes the tradition found in John Ford's uplifting, inspiring, painterly view of the American West. Although the Dollars Trilogy is well known and frequently talked about, people don't often talk about the movies that came out after the end of this trilogy and the mastery that these films display. Once Upon a Time in the West and Once Upon a Time in America are both masterful films towards the end of Leone's career that mastered their respective genres, fully understanding the ins and outs of genre conventions, as well as when to break conventions to make the film even better. In this video, I'm going to examine these two films and talk about what makes them so great, both as films as well as their impact on film history. Once Upon a Time in the West is a monumental Western epic to end all epics. This film pulls from everything in the genre that came before it, both in terms of themes and direct visual homages, to create a massive achievement of film that lives and breathes Western, while at the same time moving on from the Western genre of old and into the future. By the end of the film, the West has evolved and been cultivated with the arrival of the train, and by the end of the film, the genre itself has evolved. Sergio Leone innovated in the genre so much, and it can either continue to evolve or the genre can wither away. The way this film portrays the visuals of the American West are unlike anything else, combining the natural beauty of how John Ford views landscapes with the mastery of widescreen composition that Leone developed throughout his career. Looking at these two shots, you can see the amazing visuals on display. The shot evokes nostalgia for John Ford's films like Stagecoach, nostalgia for the past, nostalgia for a simpler West. You then look at a shot like this, which throws away the tradition of John Ford and replaces it with the trailblazing style of Sergio Leone. The entire frame is filled with something, and every inch of the frame is used intentionally. Leone's visuals are iconic, if anything, for the way it utilizes the wide frame that he chooses to shoot with. And contrasting this with the more free-form, open framing of the John Ford Western reflects this acceptance of the Western genre and the understanding that film has moved on from the West of the past. Just as films are no longer in the era of John Wayne, Western visuals are no longer in the era of John Ford. Thematically, Leone takes the best ideas and tropes and perfects them in a way that both pays homage to the genre while also providing a modern twist that updates classic ideas in the Leone style in a way that makes it nearly impossible for any director to follow up, ushering out the old and making space for the new. This perfection of Western tropes can best be seen at the end of the film as each of the characters go their separate ways. Henry Fonda's character represents the Western outlaw and dies in a gunfight with Charles Bronson's character, who plays the role of the Western drifter, only existing to enact revenge and then leave town. Jason Robards' character is metaphorically killed by the arrival of the modern railroad, being shot by a member of the railroad company, and Claudia Cardinale's character is the only one that survives, not a member of the Old West, but rather arriving by train at the start of the film, and adapting to the modern train by the end of the film, running a town with a new train station. Leone uses the idea of the train and the railroad to symbolize the death of the Wild West, both conceptually and through the death of characters associated with the old idea of the West. In a way, this film ends the Western genre by virtue of completion. By the time the film ends, thematically the Wild West of old has been conquered and the train is moving on, and with this movie, Sergio Leone has conquered the genre of the West and is moving on. It's no longer wild and there's nowhere else to go unless a filmmaker brings serious innovation, and as a result, there aren't many big-name Western movies until the 90s, when Clint Eastwood reinvents the Western with his film Unforgiven. Just as the train in Once in the West symbolizes an end of the West and the beginning of modern America, this film does the same for Leone's career, ushering in his final film, Once Upon a Time in America, doing for crime films what Once in the West does for the Western genre. If Once Upon a Time in the West was epic, then Once Upon a Time in America is a tremendous, life-consuming odyssey. The film is nearly 4 hours long and follows gangster Noodles and his childhood friends from being children committing minor crimes, into adulthood when they begin robbing banks, into old age as Noodles reflects on the deaths of his friends as a result of their criminal lifestyle. This film is so impactful because it dismantles the typical ideas found in gangster movies that came before it. The movies that came out before Once Upon a Time in America showed gangsters as being evil and eventually dying as a result of their crimes, and some crime films even make gangsters seem cool at times, but Once Upon a Time in America makes the main characters very clearly childish and immature, and not someone the audience would look up to. Rather than a character like Tony Montana or Vito Corleone, who's a criminal but can appear cool or inspiring to the audience, the criminals in this film act like children and never grow up. You follow these characters from childhood to adulthood, watching various characters die as a result of their actions but still remaining immature the entire time. They don't have style like Tony Montana or intelligence like Vito Corleone, they don't attempt to redeem themselves like Henry Hill, and they don't learn any lessons like Sam Rothstein. From beginning to end, these characters are unenjoyable and die not in a blaze of glory, but as a result of foolishness. By the end of the film, the last gangster left alive is Noodles, who is reflecting on his past, and even he hasn't changed or become a character the audience can particularly resonate with. He's evil, immature, and spending the rest of his days in an opium den. Writing the characters like this is a big risk because typically people like to see either a character they can relate to in some way, or see evil characters rise and fall, but in Once Upon a Time in America, it's downhill the whole movie. This deviation from the tradition of gangster movies made it polarizing and separates it from other crime epics like Godfather. In those movies, you see Vito as sort of a hero and Michael as a villain, and you get invited into the affairs of the family, but in this film there are no heroes. The audience is forced to sit with these horrible people as the film condemns them as evil and foolish for nearly 4 hours. Although criminals, some people may aspire to be like Tony Montana or Vito Corleone. Nobody would ever aspire to be one of the gangsters from Once in America, and that's what makes it so different. While it didn't end the genre as much as Once in the West did, it was similarly a masterpiece within a genre while acknowledging and defying the tradition that came before it, creating something wholly unique that even currently hasn't been replicated. These two films were both incredibly innovative in their respective genres for the way they combined traditional elements of the genre while also completely defying everything that came earlier in a way that only Sergio Leone could do. Although he's primarily known for his Dollars Trilogy with Clint Eastwood, it's fascinating to look at his other masterpiece epic films and see how they incorporated the influences that came before and how they influenced films into the future. Once in the West is my favorite movie from Sergio Leone, but be sure to let me know your favorite in the comments. Thanks for watching, and be sure to subscribe for more videos about movies every week.